Right. I would like to see them make that film too. In fact, if we can just go broad a bit now, David, you guys burst onto the screen 30 years ago with Malcolm. The film stands today, 30 years on, as not only still one of the funniest, just straight out funniest films ever made in Australia, but also a definitive quirky film. And genuinely quirky, not cute quirky, but this is a film with real invention in it. And I don't just mean physical invention, which you were responsible for, but I mean just in terms of the construction of the plot. It was a genuinely inventive, genuinely quirky, very, very funny physical comedy. You then went to America and you made a film called Pure Luck, which was a successful film, regardless of what some critics, such as me, thought of the film. The film was very successful.
Yep.
And it allowed you to set up a studio in Melbourne. Am I right so far?
Yes.
I guess a question that I and a lot of people would want to know is why now, 30 years down the track, is there not a Nadia Tass, David Parker established studio, a machine there every year or two, putting out 2 or 3 films? What happened? Was there a dream that went off the rails? Can you just tell us what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, it's one does get sidetracked. And one of the things is that Nadia and I had a family, and even though we attempted it for the family not to get in the road of our careers, it does. We chose to do a lot of American television, which is relatively easy. You get the job, you walk in, Nadia directs, I shoot. I work on the script often in an uncredited way, but we do well out of those, and it allows us to put the kids through school, put a roof over our heads, and all that. You're right, though. I would love to be producing a film each couple of years of our sorts of films. We find it really difficult. It's really difficult to get financing. It's also coming up with the ideas and honing them and perfecting them.
Can you tell me, from your position of experience, both here and overseas, you say it's difficult. Fine. Is it too difficult? Is it as difficult as it needs to be?
It's a really good question. We get extraordinary support in this country with the government agencies, the state agency, the federal agency. In theory, we get a lot of assistance, or there is a lot of assistance available to Australian filmmakers. We haven't necessarily found that easy to get. It's quite interesting. I don't know whether it's a tall poppy thing, but I've had some horrendous meetings with Screen Australia, particularly,
yes,
where we'll go in with for instance, with Matching Jack. Now that was a
beautiful film.
Yeah, we were really, really proud of that. Well, Screen Australia didn't want to invest in that. They did invest because we got Fox involved, and they thought, there must be something here. But the creative meetings we had were just extraordinary on that.
How so?
Well, there was a 2-person, a male and a female, quite experienced people. The male thought that a character like David in that film wouldn't exist, that there would be somebody who'd screw around like that and possibly have a child out of wedlock. That wouldn't happen. And then the woman thought that the whole story, that the female character, the Jacinda Barrett character, was being wife bashed the whole time, and it just doesn't exist in the film. I mean, she's got extraordinary strength. So you're up against those sorts of things, and in the end, you go, "What are we doing here?" Well, and it's that sort of thing is really tough.
Just for the record, I find the idea that a man has promiscuous sex with many women, and sometime down the track finds that he has fathered a child. That's not the first time in the history of cinema that's come up. There was a bloody Dwayne Johnson Disney comedy based on that idea called The Game Plan. What are they talking about? Anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
I understand
Exactly.
what you're saying.
So that's hard. I mean, it's difficult for me about Film Victoria because I'm on the board there. But and you know, certainly in recent years they've been terrific. They got involved in Matching Jack, but they weren't involved in Amy. Remember,
which is another beautiful film that you made,
which we love.
Yeah, and again had trouble finding an audience.
Yes, it did. And again, I think that becomes when you create these beautiful films, you've got to get really smart distributors, you know, who can actually figure out how to get that audience.
And I just want to quickly acknowledge The Big Steal, which was a hugely entertaining film, still very, very funny film, and again, just a film that just stands up so wonderfully. But again, it would be so wonderful rather than cite Malcolm, Big Steal, Amy, Matching Jack. It'd be great to have, instead of those 4 or 5, to have 20 by now. You know,
it would be.
And for you guys to have acted as producers to young directors coming up and to have helped nurtured and curated scripts being developed by young screenwriters and so on.
Yeah.
Was that part of
Definitely. And we do that, but we just haven't. I mean, I've produced a couple of things, but there hasn't been a Cascade Films film where we've mentored a young. We tried it. There was a Nick Earls book with a young first-time director out of Queensland, Sarah Neal, who we wanted to do exactly what you're talking about. We just found it. I remember we had Hugh Jackman on board, and I remember our last meeting with him saying, "Oh, I'm going over to LA just for a tryout for a film. You know, don't worry about it. I'll be back." That was X-Men. So there's, you know, I'm not trying to make excuses. I think a lot of it just lies on me personally. I've got to come up with the ideas. I've got we've got 2 scripts out at the moment. That one is a psychological drama, which I'm really pleased with, which we have finance for, which we're casting at present, and I have another quirky family movie, which is based on a father and daughter who make their own robot, and they get the AI for the robot off eBay, and they get a little more than they bargained for.
That sounds, if I may say, sight unseen, that sounds like a winner. Yeah. It also sounds like it would key in to the current thing about family films with Australian films. Australians tend to do family films very well. I just saw Red Dog 2.
Oh, did you?
And I figured, well, this is actually like a confirmation that people actually know how to make family films even when they go into sequel mode. Not to overstep the mark, not to try and be bigger or better than the previous film, to understand how it sort of stands in relation to that film. But we had that, we had Blinky Bill, we had Paper Planes, of course, we had Oddball. The father-daughter robot movie sounds great. Yeah. David, can I ask you what you think is missing from the Australian film industry at the moment? A particular point that keeps coming up, and this relates to your film as well, is marketing. We had just 2 weeks ago Ben Hall, which is a film that I thought would have gotten a much bigger audience than it did. But I've spoken to so many filmmakers, young and old, and they always bring up the same point when it comes to marketing, that they just do not have the resources that the Americans have. Now, we can't blame America. We can't blame Hollywood for doing what they do, because it's a marketplace. Is there something that the Australian industry can do or should do to address this issue?
Look, yeah, it's a pretty multifaceted answer, I think, but it's so true. There are so many films that just come out and disappear, and some of them must have a potential market. You know, maybe some of the turgid teenage stories are going to be pretty tough. But, you get something like Ben Hall, or, there's a number of them that that just never find a market. I think it's important that the agencies, the film agencies, take that on board and help with the distribution of films. I think that's so important. I always treat a release of one of our films. It's not a release of another film. It's a whole new product. You have to go out there like you're putting a new product on the market. It's not just a new film. And I don't think people get that. I think if you do a bit of publicity, go up and do the ABC and do all that stuff, that's going to get you an audience. It won't. It's got to be much more in this day and age with particularly Facebook and the all of that stuff can be used. It has to have a very new approach to the way we market these films.
If your film had been getting advertising on TV, say 3 or 4 weeks before its release, if there had been billboards and bus sides and bus shelters and so on, the awareness obviously would have been there, so that when people, like when Red Dog gets released, the one good thing you can say about that film is that people will know the movie, and that there will be that knowledge of the brand that will hopefully prompt people to buy a ticket and go see the movie. That's lacking in too many Australian films.
Sure. And you look at it. Say you look at a success like The Dressmaker. That campaign was brilliant. Sure, they had cast. Particularly with Liam, I think that gets undersold how important he was to that campaign. But certainly Kate Winslet as well. So you've got those two elements, and you've got something to put a campaign on. What we have, we had Noah Taylor for the Menkoff Method. That's one thing. He doesn't open movies though. He's always been more a character actor than a leading man. We had two beautiful young people with Lachlan Woods and Jessica Clark playing our lead characters. Very handsome couple. But no one wanted to interview them or put them on TV because they don't know who they are. And I think I think one of the dichotomies we had with the Menkoff Method was, to say from the creator of Malcolm is one thing, but that's not our audience. That's clearly an older audience.
Yeah.
Now, there was that all the manga work and there's a whole. We went to one of these supernova things out at the showgrounds and did a little spiel out there. There's an extraordinary group of people there just wanting with their cosplay and stuff like that. So it's a matter of getting into that and tapping into that. So any and I think that's where with The Dressmaker they were really clever. They just got everything and all the regional centres and stuff like that.
Now, just to finish up, this is an idea that I came up with. Every time I talk to young filmmakers, especially young independent filmmakers, I offer them a challenge. I ask them, I basically pretend to be a studio person from America, and I will make a deal with them. And the idea is I will give you a distribution deal or some sort of deal, and in return you will change your movie in some way. So that's when I'm talking to young filmmakers. But when I talk to veteran filmmakers, I have this new idea, and I just want to road test it with you. And that is letters to a young filmmaker. Mm-hmm. If you were to write a brief letter to a young filmmaker, just with some warnings, some cautions, some advice, what would your letter to a young filmmaker be? Dear young filmmaker.
Dear young filmmaker. I reckon you've got to. The original idea is so critical. It's got to be, like when I told you about Kelvin, our robot movie. It grabs you straight away, and I think that's really, really important. And then the script. You must refine that script. Don't listen to everyone. Don't feel that you're a new writer and feel you've got to. With Malcolm, we went through this whole process with Film Victoria had put some development money in, but we want a real writer on it. So we got a real writer, and it became Carry On Malcolm or Carry On Judith, or, it was nothing to do with the film we made. What was strange about that was Film Victoria loved that script, supposedly, and that's what they thought they were financing. But in fact, we shot my script. So, dear young filmmaker, don't do that though, because now I'm on the board of Film Victoria. You'll be found out. And then don't take no for an answer. Again, I look back on Malcolm. There were at least 8 times when we didn't have any Screen Australia or AFI as it were, AFC as it was then, money in that film. We tried 8 times to get that money, and we couldn't. There were a number of times when it wouldn't have got to screen. You must be really persistent and just do not take no. We ended up going to America with the film, and there we found success. We didn't find it in Australia. So you have to just push and push and push.
Just firstly, why no celebration?
Well, there was, yes, you have missed something.
I'm sorry, what did we...
So in Canberra, we had a 30th anniversary screening up there. We had an exhibition. They have an exhibiting hall there. They have the split cars, the yellow cars. They brought those out. They've got an amazing collection of memorabilia from around the world, mainly posters. From all sorts of different countries that I'd even forgotten that we'd sold to, because it did sell everywhere. In Melbourne, we had a screening at the Astor Theatre, which we found a 35mm print of it from 1986, which was fantastic. I mean, I checked it first, and, it was a bit scratchy, a bit dirty on the reel changes, but so wonderful to see it in that form on a 35mm projector, which the Astor still have. There were 500 people there. I reckon half of them had not seen the film before. They were younger people, generally, sometimes attached to families, to parents that had liked the film. We have the complete yellow car, which we got into the auditorium and had a little display, some of the ashtrays and things like that. So that was quite a big event.
Okay.
And, yeah.
I stand corrected on that. So there was something.
Yes.
It wasn't like a major... It wasn't as, I guess, what I'm saying is it wasn't as major an event as I dare suggest the film deserved. I would love to have seen searchlights and news items about it. Or was it on the news? Was it on, did the ABC cover it?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, they did.
Okay.
But not very, just a little.
I'll stand corrected on all that. Can I just pick you up on one point that you said? You said that you found a 35mm print of the film. What are you saying? Are you saying that the negative of the film is lost somewhere?
Oh, no, not at all. No, the archives have all that.
Okay.
And they've done a restoration of the film. I'm a great fan of the original because one of its, it's extraordinary. The colour's still there beautifully after that period of time. A lot of the internegs and the interposes, the ones we go through to get to that release print, don't hold their colour as well. So it was great to have this print, and a guy called David Kildare, who runs the Luma, is it, in Dandenong, has a print of it. He also has a story. He was the projectionist at Hoyt's in the city here on it when Malcolm came out, and he started the film half an hour early accidentally, so people came into the theatre. And he thought he was going to be fired for it. But anyway, he only fessed up to that quite recently.